Kuon, developed by From Software and released by Agetech in 2004 for the PlayStation 2. It is the Heian period of ancient Japan, and two young women make their way towards the Fujiwara mansion. Utsuki and her sister Kureha travel to the mansion to look for their father, Domon, a renowned exorcist. At the same time, Sakuya and her older brother arrive at the mansion to find Domon as well, and to investigate the strange occurrences happening around the mansion. Their two destinies will soon become intertwined in this tale of horror. Kuon is a third-person survival horror action game, where the player must find helpful clues and items as well as solve puzzles to proceed through the game and solve the mystery. When the game begins, you have a choice of two characters, Utsuki and Sakuya, referred to as the yin and the yang phase. Once the game is finished, you unlock a third character. Both characters play the same, and the only real difference is that Utsuki uses a knife and Sakuya uses a fan. Aside from your standard melee attack, there's also magic you can find throughout the game, which is divided into two categories. You have attack spells and summon spells. You equip the cards to the square and the triangle buttons respectively. If you have an empty slot, that becomes your melee attack. It is recommended that you avoid combat as much as possible in Kuon, as getting too close to the enemy can result in you taking a lot of damage. You can recover from damage by going into meditation. If you get a moment, pressing the R1 button will go into meditation mode, and it will restore your status. If you experience a traumatic event or take too much damage, your character will go into vertigo, where your cards will become useless for a few moments, so you either have to run from combat, or meditate, or just wait a few moments for vertigo to go away and return to normal. If you're familiar at all with Japanese horror and classic Japanese lore, you'll know that Kuon is dark and freaky as hell. Kuon does a fantastic job of creating atmosphere. It's dark, moody, and creepy. It always seems like there's something just out of your view watching you, or just off screen that you can barely make out. It gives you the creeps. The dialogue in Kuon is okay, and there is also an option to revert back to the original Japanese dialogue. Although none of the characters' lips move when they talk, so it looks like everyone's talking with their minds. It's a little weird. Like any classic horror game, Kuon requires you to have an item to save the game. You find save points throughout the game next to small bodies of water. You'll notice them by small little fires next to two rocks. You need to have a vessel in order to save the game, and sometimes these can get very hard to find. Kuon also takes advantage of darkness. Most games make things too dark where you have to crank your brightness up in order to see anything. But Kuon loves to put little details in the shadows, so you can always see just enough to make you curious to go over, and of course eventually get scared. My main complaint about Kuon is the combat. It's overly difficult and requires you to use a lot of items. Your melee weapon is nice and all, but it's impossible to get a rhythm going in order to stun your enemies and keep the attack up. They'll always manage to get a hit or two in, and if you take maybe 4 or 5 hits, you go into vertigo. And if you're in vertigo near enemies, it's almost impossible to get away without dying. And since vessels are spread so thin throughout the game, it causes you to save very seldomly, and nothing sucks more than getting really far and not having saved and getting cheap-shotted by a bunch of little shitheads. Overall, Kuon is a very well done and often overlooked horror game. It does Japanese horror just right and always finds a way to get under your skin and creep you the hell out. If you happen across a decently priced copy, go ahead and pick it up. This one shouldn't be too expensive, and I usually see prices around the $15 to $20 range. If you're a big fan of Japanese horror, it's right up your alley. Well guys, that's it for this episode of the 31 Games of Halloween. Please leave a like and a comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already, and please share with your friends. I thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow on day 28 of the 31 Games of Halloween. Have a good night.